Hello my crafty friends, it's Sharon Luska here from My Crafty Greetings, and we're going to do a Scrappy Tails video, and we're going to solve a problem because I can't stand those floppy gatefold cards anymore. I want to say a quick shout out to my new friends Ella, Alex, and Kate. Hey girls, hope you're getting crafty. Okay, we're going to need some potted flowers for these cards that we're going to be making. Flowers and rain boots would be great from Scrappy Tails, but potted flowers die set is the one that we're going to be using today. Both of them have 3 different types of flowers that you can add to your pots. This one I like because it has extra stems and extra flower heads that you can add. There's 2 different types of bows, and there's also a really gorgeous butterfly. I love this watering can, and there's so many ways that you can use all the different items that are in this particular die set. It's really full and a great set to use. So here's the other one, garden stand animals. We're going to be using the rabbit, but look at all the cool stuff that comes with this. She's thought of everything. And then garden stand flowers, we're grabbing this fence, but I also am so in love with this little bench here. It is just adorable. And there's great flowers here too. You can actually make a hyacinth, and she's got all the little tiny pieces here, which you could also hang upside down from the tree and make wisteria if you added all the little flowers on it. And there's just so many different sized flower heads that you can use, including the centers. It is just such a great full set. So here we go. We're going to work on these cards that we want to stay flat, and you can see I've got one that's got my trick already, and then one that doesn't, a gatefold card, and you can see that mine stays nicely closed and the other one misbehaves badly. So here we go. We want to make a 5x7 card, so I am scoring at 2.5 and 7.5. And then I'm going to run a score line down number 10 because we're actually going to be cutting there. Now I'm working on a full 8.5 by 11 inch cardstock piece. We're going to end up with a 7 by 10 piece by the time we've got it cut. Now here's the secret score line that's going in, and I'm just putting those inside. So we've got a center panel here that's 5 inches wide, and slightly to the inside of our lines here I have that second score line, and they're actually 1/4 of an inch inside the 2.5 and 7.5 inch score lines. And I've got that on the bottom there where you're going to be scoring them. So you can see there's an overlap here, and I always find it's best to mark your overlap to cut off after you folded your card. So you can see there's that sneaky line, and because we scored at 2.5 and 7.5, that second score line is going to be at 2 3/4 and 6 3/4. Now I'm just cutting off that extra where I marked it. It meets nicely in the middle, and now we want to make this a 7-inch wide panel, and you can see my little piece of tape there. I marked that so I know where 7 inches is. I've got the thickest part at the top where my guillotine is strongest, and I've got that cut off. Now in this little fold ditch here, you're going to put glue, tape runner, or tape, any type of adhesive. You just want to get it in between those 2 score lines. When using the glue, I like to use some binder clips just to make sure it gets well stuck. So just to make sure that you understand this completely, I wanted to show you in a little bit more detail exactly how these folds go together and how they work. So I'm just reinforcing them here. You can see they make this kind of Z shape, and that little ditch in between is where we're going to be putting our adhesive, whether it's glue, tape, or ATG. You can put it right in there. So that little ditch between the 2 score lines is actually going to glue to this front panel to make our hinge. So you can see these 2 pieces here are stuck together. The one face sticks to the other face, so all my pencil marks are going to disappear as soon as we put some adhesive in here. So you can see that there, and that's what's going to make this hinge that holds everything flat but allows the card to open. So now I'm putting some tape, some thin strong tape. This is 1/4 inch tape, and it's just going in between those 2 score lines, and I'm just going to burnish it in so that it's got some nice adhesion. We'll peel off the protective paper and fold it over, and then I'm going to burnish the outer layer, or the outer fold, on top of that hinge. So there's the back, and I'm burnishing it from the back as well. So you can see that hinge, how it folds back onto the card, and I'm going to reinforce that too. Use your bone folder lots because you want this hinge to work nice and smoothly. but you can see how that works. So here we are back at the first card that we're working on. And if you want to use ATG and you want to make absolutely certain that you don't go past that score line, go ahead and use a little bit of that protective film. And when you flip it over, it'll fold in any errant little pieces of ATG. You can use this on other stuff too, but it makes sure that you've got a nice clean straight line of ATG so that it doesn't interfere with the workings anywhere else. And again, I'm going to burnish that and fold it back, and then we're going to train those folds to make sure that they know that that's where they're meant to be bending, because this is now your hinge. I hope that makes good sense. So here they are, just your regular trifold and with our secret hinges at the back. And you can see that trifold just keeps wanting to pop open. So we need a belly band to make it behave like a belt. And if we take it off, it just pops right out again. So we have our flowers already done. And you probably saw when I did the release reveal that I'd already done these flowers and I showed them, but they weren't on a card yet. Well, these are the cards that I'm going to be putting them on. And you can see I'm trying all these different pattern papers. They're from different companies. Some are Stampin' Up, some are loose sheets from American Crafts that I bought at the craft store. Others came out of pads that I had. But this is what I do when I already have something colored, is I kind of flip through my papers, and if they stay on the white squares that I want to be part of my composition, I'm going to add some glue boogers to make them behave. I can slide them off and see what I like best. And although this looks really amazing, there was another choice that I had that I ended up going with, and that's this teal. Now, a number of different companies here. One's Stampin' Up and the other one's American Crafts, and then this is just a 1980s paper. And I love how those three go together. It's greens and teals, and although they're different, you can see how they work. None of them have too strong or too intense a pattern. They don't have any other extra colors in them, and you can see that they're going to work just great. Now I'm just cutting out a 5x7 piece out of my 12x12 paper, and I will post a trick up here that you can cut 4 perfect 5x7 sheets of paper from one 12x12 without any waste. And then I'm going to split this in half, so 2.5 inches for each panel, and then I'm putting some ATG on the front here, and I want to make sure the pattern matches before I put these down, so that that fold line is going to be absolutely invisible by the time we get this card assembled. So you can see here that panel fits perfectly and sits on the fold perfectly, and everything stays down nice and flat. Now I'm going to layer up some pieces, and the green with the stripes here, we won't have to worry about it because I'm putting such a tiny border. I think it's about a 32nd of an inch border here. And the other thing I noticed too is that the white looked kind of stark and the pots looked like they were kind of floating, and I'm in a no pots floating kind of mood today. So I used my gray brush and then my blue brush, and this is the blue brush that I did that technique where I just added the ink directly into my brush, and this is still inking everything, no problem. I just shined up that pot there, and then art glitter glue is what I'm using to glue this down. Just put dots everywhere. These are going to stick no problem. All right, so I need some birthday cards, and I went ahead and got myself die cut some sentiments here. 2 green and 1 silver from this Creative Expressions die. After die cutting the pieces out, I went and put little dots of Tombow Mono Multi on the back. This will make it easier to stick them together, but the best tool is glasses. If you can see these little suckers, you can line them up really good. I dropped one shadow up and to the left and the other one down and to the right, and hovering over top of the green die cut made it a lot easier to get this into place. And it left it with a beautiful green border. So I've got to attach my squares on, and I thought I better do a dry fit first. I wanted to see how these were all going to go together before I made a final decision as to how these are going to be laid out. That's, I think, a good policy when you're crafting, especially if you're making up your layout by yourself. So these are going to hang off the left gate, and I want to make sure that they don't end up glued to the right gate. And I certainly don't want a nasty show of glue boobers from where the glue has squirted out. So I've just added myself a piece of acetate to protect the right gate as I'm gluing these down. Now I can see with those squares where they're going to be overlapping on my left gate, and that's why I added the glue where I did. And it gives me a moment to squidge those into place and make sure that they're lined up properly. So with this one though, I'm going to use some ATG, and I'm going to apply the ATG in a C shape. So on the very left hand edge, and then on the top and the bottom. And that way it's going to attach to the very left gate and also to the top square and the bottom square. Now that those are showing, we can see obviously that paper does not go with what we're doing here. So I've got some Neenah Solar White cut into appropriately sized squares. And this is going to reinforce those hanging off the side. And I'm sure that there's a name for that, and I have no clue what it is. But the protrusion from the one gate is going to be supported by that extra bunch of squares of Neenah Solar White. So I've added some packing foam to the back of my squares, and you can see I've also removed some so that it's not too bulky where those squares are going to overlap. And I'm just using a little bit of Tombow Mono Multi to stick that down. It is an excellent glue for sticking down anything that has any plasticky consistency to it. So once I've gotten those in place and settled to glue, I'm just going to tip forward the middle piece and add a couple little blobs of glue to hold everything into place. I'm also going to go ahead and add a couple little streaks of Tombow Mono Multi onto the back of my sentiment, and I'm going to set that aside to dry just so that it gets tacky. That's going to avoid me having glue squishing out, and that's going to leave a sticky residue. So I wanted to pop this up, and I needed a way to sneakily pop it up without anybody being able to really notice that I've done that. So what I did was cut a matching pattern square, and I'm lining that up against the edge of the detail square. I'm kind of looking at it and saying, okay, where would I put that happy birthday? And once I've got it stuck onto the square, I'm going to add some ATG and glue on my lift, which is a little bit of packing foam sheet. Once that's all stuck together, I'm just going to do a loose cut around my sentiment, and it's going to give it a little bit of a chameleon effect in the background where you won't be able to see as easily that I've popped it up. Now, an easy way of knowing where to add the glue and where it needs to be placed to match the pattern is to use the piece that you cut away in the first place. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue in place here to grab on to that foam piece. And once we place it back into where it was cut out from, you'll notice how well it matches the pattern. Isn't that a great way to hide the fact that you've put some tape or foam lift behind your sentiment? So you can see there my trifold is beautiful and flat. Now we do have an ugly piece here, but not to worry. I have a scrap that I can cover it up with. And I just added some ATG to the back, and that's got her done. Bada boom, bada bing. Now I did add some of these water droplets too. So there's that lift on the happy birthday. I added some water droplets too, and these glue down fabulously well if you're going to use glossy accents. Glossy accents keeps them shiny, and if it squishes out, you will never notice that it's there. And that's my first card done. Now we're going to go on to another card after this. What if you don't already have your die cuts colored? What if you have paper that you want to use and you want to make a feeling with the paper that you have and using die cuts that are white that need to be colored? So I've got a nice kind of cobalt colored sentiment here, and I've got a cobalt colored pot, as well as a copper pot and a terracotta pot. And I thought that some kind of strong rustic reds might look really good with this yellowy colored pattern paper. I guess is it mustardy color? I'm not sure what you call it, but this dark colored yellow paper. So I have all of my reds and oranges together in one bunch, and this is my collection over the years of all these different colors. And I like to just kind of flip through and see what might work, and I pull a few options out and give them a little test drive with all the little pieces that I have. And as I'm passing through, there's lots that won't work, but lots of possibilities that would work. But I'm specifically looking for something that has a little bit more of a masculine kind of theme to it. So there's my pieces, and I'm picking the final winners of the rusticy kind of reds here, and I want to make sure that it's not overpowering. And then I also pulled out some of my Copics. I pulled out a bunch of greens here, and once I swatched them out on my paper, I could see that they were not any green that looked too springy, too fresh, or too cartoony. And then I also got some oranges and some reds. One included is E08, and it's going to do a fantastic job for what I'm doing. But one of my Copics was completely crusty for whatever reason, so I had to find a replacement. And honestly, you know what? Unless you're coloring for a cartoon, you don't need colors that match exactly. Close enough is good enough. Nobody's going to know that you could have had something that was a slight shade brighter than what you used. Just use what you've got. Even if you don't have Copics, maybe you have some Spectrum Noirs or Ogatogis or whatever the heck they're called. I know there's some good ones out there. Mary Polenko is got a fantastic bunch of videos on markers, alcohol markers that are really, really great and cost effective and would do an excellent job for this. But you can see I'm just scribbling over top of these die cuts. I haven't popped them out of the Nina Solar White that they're in, but all I'm doing is just swiping color, not paying too much attention and not worrying. These flowers are beautiful, beautiful die cuts. They don't need all kinds of extra coloring. Just making sure that they get covered with some pigment is going to be all they really need. And if you want to add some depth by adding in some extra little swipes and details here and there, you will be away to the races. Now these beautiful cloudy flowers, I'm not sure what they are, but I'm using that E08, which is a very reddy brown color, to just make the stems for the flowers. I've seen flowers like this in my mom's garden when I was younger, and they always had very dark green, glossy leaves. And the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that this looked like Veronica or Salvia, one of those spiky purple plants. And I added in some white details with my white gel pen, as well as a few on those brightly colored orange and white flowers. And I'm just going to pop them out, and then I'm going to pop out all of the little extra pieces that come out to make sure that these look super duper detailed. So I'm gluing them in the pots, and once I have the main cluster glued in, you can take all the individual stems and just kind of toss them wherever you want. Don't worry about them too much. There's a big flower here, and there's so many leaves behind it. Nobody's going to know whether it's got a stem or not. I've added the rims to the pots, and I'm adding the stems to the other floral arrangements here to fill them out. These guys I added to the front, and I also had the idea too that kind of looks like lavender spilling over a pot. So I glued the bunch to the front of the pot and just made it look like it was spilling forward from that terracotta pot. So this looks like it's done, but alas, this is not going to show you what we're trying to learn with this card. So I am going to put a score line at 3 inches, and I'm going to fold it, and then I'm going to cut this down so that it's 5 inches wide and 7 inches. So it's got a 5x7 front with a 3-inch flap. And then I'm adding here a little score line that is 1/4 of an inch. And where I marked it, I cut just below there because I want the hinge to be just below where our paper is going to overlap. So now we're adding that extra ditch there by adding the extra score line. And I'm going to fold that back. So then we have that hinge at the top, and then we're going to have a mini hinge at the side. And I'm doing my ATG. Now I left myself a nice wide 1/4 inch score line hinge there. And so I had lots of space to put my ATG. And then I'm going to cut a piece that's 2 inches by 7 inches. And that's going to be a sideways hinged flap. So it's kind of a weird gatefold, something different. Anyway, something to think about. You could have so many different combinations of how you can take these hinges and make gatefold cards. Now I'm cutting this to 3 by 7 and 2 by 7. So those two pieces are going to match as well, just like we did with the first ones. And that way then you're not going to see the seam where they meet up together. I'm going to add this to the top hinged piece, and then I'm going to add our bottom matching piece to the opposite direction hinge. I don't know, what do we call this? An up and down hinge and a left and right hinge. So once I've got that in place, you can see here it has a nice bend, and we just need to cut a little tiny bit of an easement wedge here so that as that moves, it does not get caught up. Okay, now it's time to make this cute little bunny even more adorable. We've added a little black nose, and I've ripped off a rough piece of masking tape just to cover his little fluffy pom-pom tail. We're sweeping in a peachy pink or just any light colored marker that you have. Mine's a Copic. And I'm taking my gray blending brush, and I'm just sweeping whatever's left on there over top of the bunny so it catches in all of the little nooks and crannies and helps with the details. I'm blackening in the eye, and then I'm going to put on some white gel pen just to finish this off and also to cover up a few of my little Copic mistakes. Now, if you have lasted this long through the video, thank you so much for joining me. I sure hope you've subscribed so that you can find me again and join us in some of these crazy adventures on here. I would so love it if you would give me a thumbs up, and that will help other people find me, and a comment would be wonderful. As usual, all of my links will be listed below, and thank you to all my friends that have used those. It's such a blessing to me to know that my videos have impacted you, that you enjoyed them, and that Sabrina, my boss, knows that I've been doing a good job as well. And at no extra cost to you, I do receive a commission that really helps keep me on the air here on YouTube. So here we are. I just adhered that little detail strip, and I have that inky blue brush that I'm just adding a few smudges so that we can see that beautiful picket fence up against the background there. Now I've got another piece of my packing foam, and I'm adhering that to the back of my white panel so that I can use some Tombow Mono Multi, someday I'll learn how to say that, and adhere it to my red panel. I've got a little piece of plastic here, specifically acetate, to protect my top panel from me gluing down my bottom panel. And I'm going to use some ATG. Now I can see where that bottom panel is, so I've got a good idea of where I'm running the lines of ATG from to, but I'm also going to add a little art glitter glue here as well, just to make sure it's sealed well at the very top connection there, and I'm just going to squish it to make sure. So I already added some Tombow Mono Multi to my fence. I let it dry so nothing squishes out. And I've got my little pots here that I'm adding art glitter glue generously to the back. You don't have to worry that this is going to make a mess. I promise you it won't. I've got my other pot here already glued up, and I was using that copper pot just to eyeball some spacing. Always better to eyeball than to place it and have to peel it up. I've got my bunny down, and then I also did put some Tombow Mono Multi on that cobalt blue happy birthday sentiment. It was pre-colored with a Copic and just looks gorgeous there. So one quick mechanical thing that I need to point out, the panel that we added in the red there, it has to be at least a ½ inch away from the side where the hinge is so that it can clear the side of the card. So there's that top hinge, there's our side hinge, and there's how it opens up, and you can see that that panel just comes up to the edge of our card base. And that way then when we open and close it, so I'm just saying the hinge and the distance should be twice. So whatever the width of the hinge is, you should be twice as far away with the panel. but that panel then is going to rotate on that hinge, and we just want to make sure that it's got some room to get out of the way. I added a couple copper stripes to tie all the colors in together, and I think it turned out pretty well. I hope I've inspired you to try a different type of card in your craft room, and hopefully you'll try a hinged gatefold yourself, whether it's one like this or like the first card that we did. I do absolutely love the set that came out with this most recent release that Sabrina's done. Those potted flowers are gorgeous, and that little bunny is just amazing. So thank you so much for joining me today, and hopefully you get some time in the craft room. Here's some more videos, and thanks so much for watching.